Hey, what's up, Toilet Water Squad? I'm Big P, and I'm streaming out some peach ice cream for peach ice cream sandwiches for the Masters weekend. If you don't know, the Masters is a golf tournament that's held at Augusta National Golf Club in Georgia every year, and they have these peach ice cream sandwiches. So just peach ice cream between two sugar cookies. My friend Cranchopple Showple is making the sugar cookies, so that won't be in this video, but you could probably find a sugar cookie recipe pretty easily, or you could just buy sugar cookies from the store. I made two batches. The first batch didn't taste too strongly like peach, so I modified some stuff, and what I'm showing in this video will be from the second batch. All right, it's time to get into this cookery. I'm using frozen peaches because it's April in Colorado, so this is probably going to be the freshest, best option. This is a 453-gram bag, and I'm going to use pretty much all of that, so try to get something around that weight. We're going to be adding the peaches in two different forms, so that just to add different layers of peach. So this first layer that I'm weighing out now is going to be at 120 grams, and we're going to thaw these out because we're going to add these later fresh, like not cooked. So I weighed them out earlier in the day and I put them in the refrigerator. You could just leave them out on the counter if you want to do this soon, and they don't have to be completely thawed out before we add them, so don't worry too much about that if you're short on time. I did forget to mention that I use stabilizers in my ice cream. You don't have to do that though. You could make this just without the stabilizers, or I'll also provide a recipe if you want to use egg yolks. I'll provide that in the description. So some of these measurements are going to be a little bit different if you're using the egg yolks. I'm going to be saying the stabilizer or just no stabilizer or egg yolk version. Next, we're going to work on our other application of peach flavoring, which is we're going to cook some peaches with the sugars and the salt for the recipe uh, to get rid of some of the water in the peaches, and it's going to create a peach syrup. Peach syrup. So I'm putting 340 grams of the frozen peaches into this saucepan. I had 320 grams on in my recipe, but I only had 20 more grams left of peaches in the bag, so I just added those two. This process is going to force us to be a little more imprecise than I would like it to be, than I would like us to be, um, because we're going to be cooking out water, and it's going to be a little imprecise about how much water gets cooked out. It's kind of hard to nail that. So in my recipe, I wrote 320 grams of peaches. I'm putting in 340 grams. I'll just say 320 to 340 in the recipe. And by the way, if you're making the egg yolk recipe, everything is the same so far. And I just looked, it looks like only the heavy cream and the milk are different for the egg yolk recipe. I messed up something here, and I'm going to tell you the right way to do it so that you don't mess it up too. Only add 75 grams of sugar here. Don't add 100. Save 25 grams for later. After that, add 4.5 grams of salt, and then 50 grams of light corn syrup or glucose syrup or golden syrup, whatever you have. And we're going to stir this up and let it sit for 20 to 30 minutes, and the sugars and the salt are going to pull moisture out of the peaches, and it's just going to start creating that peach syrup. If you're running short on time, you don't have to do this that long. You could probably just even skip this, but I'm just telling you what I think is the best way to do it. This is what mine looked like after just sitting at room temperature for 25 minutes. You can see there's a lot more liquid in there that got pulled out of the peaches, and it's a little syrupy. Now I have it on the stove, and you want to simmer it for about 10 minutes. So it'll be on the stove for a total of about 15 minutes while you get it up there to simmering. Um, I put it on like medium. I put it on like medium high heat at the beginning, and then I turn it down to like medium or a little bit lower than that once it starts to simmer a little bit. Definitely do not skip this part. If you skip the part before where you let it sit on the counter, that's probably fine, but definitely don't skip the cooking. There's a ton of water in peaches, and if you don't cook some of that water out, then there's going to be a ton of water in your ice cream and it's going to freeze too hard. I did a very stupid thing and I left the room while this was happening. So I probably should have turned the heat down before it got to this point, because you don't want to cook it too aggressively because you want to preserve that bright, fresh peach flavor. But I had to answer a call, and now I'm back and I'm stirring it up and I'm turning the temperature down a little bit. And I'm increasing the speed of this fast forwarding through like 10 minutes of video. We're just looking to cook these until the peaches are a little softened. So what I'm looking for is to be able to kind of cut one in half by just like stabbing it with my spatula thing, which is also a little hard to do because these peaches are slippery and they're shaped kind of weird, so they kind of run away from the spatula, but you can see I just did it right here. Then I test a few other ones, and then I take it off the heat. So we want to take it off the heat, and then we want to pour it into a bowl, and we're going to let this cool down. I'm doing this on top of a scale because I'm curious to see how much water weight we lost. So we started off with 340 grams of peaches. We added 100 grams of sugar, and then we added 50 grams of light corn syrup and 4.5 grams of salt. So we started with 494.5 grams. And we ended up with 434 grams. So we lost about 60.5 grams. So we lost about 12% of our weight. Our total weight, that is. Most of that weight comes from the 340 grams of peaches. So we really lost about like 17% of our weight of the water from peaches. From the peaches. And as you may be able to see from this video, they're still steaming. So that means that water is still evaporating and they are still continuing to lose some more liquid. So they'll probably lose somewhere between 20 and 30% of the weight of the original peaches. It's hard to say. This video is unnecessary and I only really recorded it to get Instagram film. But if this helps you by showing you what to look for soft peaches, then good. Now it's time for the cream. This is where you should add that other 25 grams of sugar. I did not do that, and that kind of messed things up a bit, but it worked out. It'll make things harder if you don't do it that way. You need the sugar here so that you can disperse the other dry ingredients into the sugar, because all the other dry ingredients will clump up in liquid. So all the skim milk powder that I'm putting in here is going to clump in the liquid. But if it's dispersed into sugar, then it won't clump up. So save yourself a headache and save some of that sugar and put in 25 grams of sugar now, and then 30 grams of skim milk powder. On most of my recipes, I say that if you really want to, you can skip the skim milk powder, but I highly recommend it for all my recipes. But on this recipe, I would say that you can't really skip it. It might work out fine if you skip it, but I really can't just say that it will because I'm not sure. You would be removing a lot of solids from the recipe, and if the liquid's too high, then the ice cream will be much harder. And it seems like the amount of it should be fine, but if you're putting this in an ice cream sandwich, then it's going to be pretty hard, I think, if you don't use the skip milk powder. I'm about to put in my stabilizers now, so you could ignore this if you want to use no stabilizers and no egg yolks, or if you want to just use egg yolks. But you could also use, if you want to use xanthan gum, you could just use 1.3 grams of xanthan gum. I'm saying that because a lot of people use that, but I use different stabilizers. So I'm putting in 0.2 grams of lambda carrageenan, zero 0.4 grams of guar gum, and zero 0.8 grams of locust bean gum. And no matter what version of the recipe you're doing, this is the point where you want to stir it up to disperse everything into the sugar so that it doesn't clump up in the liquid. If you're doing the egg yolk version, this is the point where you would want to add your egg yolks and break them up and stir them into the mixture. It's 70 grams of egg yolks, and that's probably about like 5 egg yolks. And now we're going to add the whole milk. For my version, it's going to be 80 grams of whole milk. For the egg yolk version, only add 75 grams. Once the milk is in, you should use a whisk and stir it all up to try and get everything dissolved into that. I'm not sure how that's going to go. It's a good amount of dry ingredients and not that much liquid. It might be easy to get it all dissolved in, but it might not. And if it's not easy to get it all dissolved in, that's fine because I didn't do it. So I'll show you a fix later. But after that, we're going to add our peach and sugars and salt mixture that we made earlier. Test, test, test. I'm trying to stir. I'm trying to stir that all in now, and you can see that there's lots of clumps of dry powder, dry ingredients. It's basically the milk powder is getting all clumped up in there, and stabilizer too. But there's just so much of it in there that's got to be a lot of milk powder. Later on, I'm going to use an immersion blender and just blend this, and that will fix the issue. The final ingredient that we're going to add before heating the mixture is coconut oil. We're going to add 20 grams of coconut oil. Make sure you get refined coconut oil and make sure it's edible. So this ingredient actually kind of is optional. If you don't want to use it, you don't have to, and the ice cream will still work. I do recommend that you use it though. It adds more fat to the recipe, and because of that, it will melt slower, which I've made some fruit ice creams before, and they tend to melt a little quicker. I don't know if it's just, maybe I just had worse recipes back then, but I was trying to be conscious of that, and added this. This also helps just with the texture. It'll make it a much creamier texture, which is very nice. Once everything's all mixed in, we're taking it over to the stove and we're heating it on medium heat until we get to different temperatures for whatever recipe you're doing. So if you're using my stabilizers, you want to get it to 185 degrees Fahrenheit. If you're using xanthan gum or no stabilizers, you just want to heat it until it's kind of like lightly steaming. And then if you're using egg yolks, you want to get it up to around 180 degrees Fahrenheit. And for all of these, you want to be stirring it pretty often, just to make sure that nothing burns, or, just to make sure it's heated evenly. And then for the egg yolks, it's because you don't want the eggs to scramble. You should keep this on a medium heat and not a medium high heat, because all of the amount of sugar in this compared to the liquid and the solids and everything, my mixture started to bubble, like it was boiling before it got up to 185 degrees, and it shouldn't be boiling until about 202 degrees because I'm at high altitude, so it's a different boiling point than sea level. But yeah, so keep it at a lower heat so that it heats more evenly and consistently. Um, and if it starts to bubble, that's fine. Just keep heating it until you get to the temperature that your mix needs to get to. And at that point, you want to take it off the stove and pour it into a bowl. Once you get it in the bowl, we're going to add our heavy cream. So for my version, it's 360 grams of heavy whipping cream. For the egg yolk version, it's 325 grams of heavy whipping cream. And you want to stir that all in so that it cools down the mixture a bit before we add in our next ingredients, because they're going to be alcohol based and we don't want the alcohol to evaporate. We want that to stay in there because it's important for keeping the ice cream soft later, because the alcohol does not freeze. So right here, I'm adding 7 grams of vanilla extract. All right, so the next ingredient I'm going to add is Disaronno. I'm doing this because almond flavor kind of helps boost the peach flavor. But Disaronno is like a amaretto type alcohol, but it does not contain nuts. It's made from apricot pits, I believe, and I think burnt sugar. So I'm using this because it's similar to almond, so it should enhance the peach flavor without adding nuts to the recipe. So you could do the same if you want, or you could use some other type of amaretto, or if you can't buy alcohol for some reason, um, you can just put in just more vanilla extract. You can just replace this with vanilla extract. It might be a little extra, a little more vanilla-y than mine, but it's important to have that alcohol in there. And I mean, if you can buy alcohol, but you don't have this type of alcohol, you could just add vodka because there's no flavor to that. But whether you're using Disaronno vanilla extract or some other type of alcohol, you want to use 10 grams. And then you want to add in those 120 grams of fresh peaches that we were thawing out earlier. And then you just want to blend it all up. You want to blend it for probably about like 30 seconds. You don't want to blend it too much, but you also want to blend it enough that it, all gets blended up. Right there, I'm testing the temperature just to see if it's cooled off now. And since it is cooled off, I'm going to add the lemon juice. I think it was around like 100 degrees Fahrenheit when I tested it. Now I'm pouring the mixture just through a sieve before I add the lemon juice, just to get out any chunky stuff, anything that wasn't blended up well enough. And make sure to scrape the bottom of the strainer, because there can be a lot of stuff just hanging there that is already strained. And if you get a tiny bit of stuff, if you get a little bit of chunks in there, don't worry about it, because it's going to be a small amount in this, and it's going to be basically undetectable. I should stop saying chunks. I should say fibrous material. Here is an out of focus shot of me adding 15 grams of lemon juice. The lemon juice is important because it's important in a lot of fruit ice creams. The acidity in it, it really brings out the flavor of the fruits, of the peach, or it does it with strawberry. I'm sure it does it with plenty of fruit ice creams. But yeah, it brightens the flavor of the fruit, of the flavor that you're, making. That's it. That's all of the ingredients. So stir that all up and then cover it and put it in the fridge overnight. I took it out the next day to see what it was looking like, and it looked like there was still a little bit of fibrous material in there, or possibly lumps from the skim milk powder. I'm not quite really sure. But I decided to then blend it up a little bit more. So I blended it for about another 30 seconds, and then that seemed to do the trick. It seemed like a pretty good texture. It seems a little bit thick compared to other ice creams I've made, but it seems good. I put it back in the fridge, and then the next day I took it out to churn it. You don't have to keep it in the fridge for 2 days like I did. I only did that because we were going to be putting the ice cream sandwiches together right after churning it. And this is just the day that we plan to do that. You should keep it in the fridge for overnight, though, at least one day, like I'm just saying you don't need to do it for 2 days. When you're all ready, pour it into your machine and churn it. This churned like super quickly. Like honestly, it looked done after like 2 minutes, but I left it in there for about 10 minutes, and yeah, then we took it out and we assembled the sandwiches. So my friend Cram Pop was there. She's the one who made the cookies, and she made some sugar cookies, which is the traditional thing for these. And then she also made some caramel gochujang cookies, which are very delicious. And she thought that they would be good for this type of thing, and she was right. It was great. But yeah, so we did these two different ways because if you remember at the beginning of the video, I said that I made two different batches. So on this batch, what we did was we made the sandwiches right after churning the ice cream while the ice cream was still kind of soft. And it worked out really well, I think. So if you have the timing right, you should do it this way, I think. If you have the cookies all made and everything. You don't want the cookies to be too hard, or they'll crumble. So she made the cookies earlier that day, and I put them in the freezer for like 20 minutes. I put them in the freezer while the ice cream was churning, so that they would be a little colder, so that they wouldn't melt the ice cream. But they didn't really get that cold, so I don't know if it's even really worth worrying about that at all, because this seems to have worked out fine. You don't want them completely frozen because then they'll get too hard, like I mentioned, and you don't want that because they could crumble while you try to press them together. And so what we did on our little assembly line here is I just put the ice cream onto a cookie, and then she got new pieces of saran wrap and then wrapped it in the saran wrap. You can see here that she's trying to press the plastic wrap against the ice cream. This is so that the ice cream doesn't have as much contact with the air, so that there's less of a possibility for ice crystals to form. So to try to keep everything cold, once she would get them all wrapped up in the plastic, she would put them into the freezer. And then once we got the whole batch finished, I put all of them into a freezer bag so that just to protect them more from like freezer burn or like a freezer smell or just air really in general. So I put them into a freezer bag, and then I used a straw to suck the air out of the freezer bag because as like kind of like a vacuum pack sealer type thing because I don't have a vacuum sealer. So that's the end of that batch, but we'll get back to the packing in a minute. Right now I'm going to show you this is from the first batch of ice cream that I made. This is the other way that we did it. So I spread the ice cream out onto a parchment lined tray, and then I froze it pretty much. The parchment paper was sliding around a lot, so I got some like cooking oil spray and I sprayed it under the parchment paper so that it would stick to the pan more and be easier to work with. Then I spread the ice cream out as evenly as I could onto the tray, and I covered it with plastic wrap, and I tried to get as much air out of that as possible. I tried to press it down against the ice cream and just push air out out of the sides so that ice crystals wouldn't form. I then put that in the freezer overnight. You want to put it in the freezer for at least a few hours so that it firms up, so that it's easier to cut into circles, and it's and hold together once it's cut. The next day I took it out of the freezer and I used a mug to cut circles. Not that mug, but there's a different mug. Um, and I did that because I went to Goodwill to try and find like cookie cutters, or like ring molds or anything, and they didn't have any. So then I went to Walmart, and they didn't have any either. Every time I go to Walmart, they have everything in the world except the thing that I'm looking for. But yeah, so that I just used a mug. It was a little harder because the air gets trapped in there and it kind of creates like a suction. But it's possible to do it that way. You could also just, put the mug on top and like just kind of like create like a divot and then trace that divot with a knife to cut it out. But the method that I showed you earlier, I think is easier, but you can do this method if, depending on how the timing works. If the ice cream, if you make the ice cream before the cookies are ready. If you do it this way, you should have a little bowl or pot of warm water so that you can dip the mug in it before each press. And you also want a towel so that you can dry. You want to dip it in the water to kind of warm it up, and then you want to dry it off with a towel, and then you want to press it in and try to cut your circle. You don't want it to be wet when you're doing that. After you cut out your circle, you want to put it on saran wrap and wrap it up so that there's no air touching the ice cream, and then put it in the freezer. I'm doing the same thing as I did for the other, for the cookies, for the sandwiches. So basically just wrap them up, put them in the freezer so that they stay cold. And then once you're done all of it, put them in a like a Ziploc bag so that it protects them from freezer smells and stuff like that. Once you no longer have an area that's has enough ice cream to make a circle, you can reform it. So basically, just kind of carefully get all the ice cream back together, and don't press it too hard or anything. Just kind of just be gentle and get it all back into one shape. And then cover it again with plastic wrap, and then put it back in the freezer to firm up again before trying to cut more circles. So like I said, the other method is easier, but depending on the timing of when you're doing things, you might have to do it this way. Or, a better way. If you think of a better way, let me know. This is what I was talking about earlier when I said sucking the air out of the bag with a straw. Now back to packing them. We're going to pack those ones now, the pre-made like pucks. The thing about this is also that they're already a certain size and they're already frozen. So you can't really smush them down to fit the cookie better. So you should have the cookie to be about the same size already as the size that you made these.
Yeah, do an unboxing.
Yes.
Do we tap on it for some ASMR?
Yeah.
You ready?
We have fun. But hey, that's pretty much it. So I guess it's time for the taste test. I just have a quick video from eating it at the party, and they came out really good actually. They were very well reviewed. Some people said that the gochujang cookies overpowered the peach ice cream, and they preferred the sugar cookie ones, and some people preferred the gochujang caramel ones. So they were both good. Something that I was really going for on this ice cream was to make it so that it would be pleasant to eat in a sandwich. So like, pleasant to bite into. And this succeeded in that. It wasn't too hard to bite into, but it was firm. It wasn't too soft. It didn't melt. And it wasn't like super cold on your teeth. If an ice cream has too much liquid and not enough solids, or if there's not high enough fat, its perceived coldness can be colder. And this was great. These sandwiches are big, and it took me a while to eat, and it didn't melt like at all. And there was plenty of peach flavor too. Thanks for watching. Well, it seems our time has come to an end. Thank you for watching Toilet Water Squad. Like and subscribe, and check out some other videos about ice cream or high altitude baking or just other food stuff. And big shout out to the Upper Decker members. You guys are keeping a roof over my family's head. And remember to hug your pets. Give them a nice little pet and give them a big ol' hug from Big P. That's me.